And then Mary, you're going to do the intro.
Yeah. Do we do the? We're not YouTubing it today.
We are. It's YouTube right now running. Say hi.
I, I'm waving at a blank screen.
Oh
but
wait,
okay.
we need a lower thirds.
Hmm.
We forgot how to podcast. We better hurry up.
All right.
It's been a while.
Almost there. Hold on.
And I have a suggestion for the next time we do this. If we, I don't know if that Connect one is going to be a good one to do, but I have a suggestion for the next big one we have that has a vendor section. Is that we go to vendors and we check with them to see where Linux fits into their solution, because I took a picture of this. I was talking to a guy from Veritas, and he was telling me that right here in the middle of all this, that little server here is running Linux.
I believe Microsoft caches their main website behind Akamai, which is all Linux servers.
Oh, they have for
Yeah,
years.
there
Their
you go.
Windows Update used to run on Red Hat load balancers, and that was always a joke forever. But Microsoft didn't make the product scalable enough for it.
Yeah.
And this goes back 10 years, 15
Pretty
years
funny.
ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. Now our lower thirds are running.
All right, great. And we're running on YouTube, so I can make
Yep.
my disclaimer.
Go ahead.
Or disclaimer. Hi, you're watching the raw, unedited version of the Sunday Morning Linux Review. If you wish to listen to the fully edited final version, I strongly urge you to go to smlr.us.
The Sunday Morning Linux Review with Mary Tomich, Tom Lawrence, and Tony Bemis as the beeper.
And this is episode 251.
Open source ignites. Is that right? How close was I?
Igniting open source.
Igniting open source.
There we go. There we go. Okay. Igniting open source. I'm Mary Tomich.
Tony Bemis.
Tom Lawrence.
Phil Parada.
All right. Well, that was
It's
That
been
went-
a long
that went
week.
so smooth.
We're off to the races.
yes, we are off to the races. Well, we had such a plethora of options for our episode name. I think that it was very exciting. So obviously we settled on at least two.
Yeah.
So today we're going to be discussing, kind of recapping, discussing our time at the Microsoft Ignite conference, and how open source and Linux are playing a pretty good role in that in their efforts. So it was really exciting to
Yeah.
talk with a lot of people there that are involved in Microsoft's efforts. And Tom and Tony, I know you did. Unfortunately, Phil was not there. We missed him terribly.
Thanks. I was at work meetings and data centers.
Yeah, somebody
Ah.
somebody has to stay back and do the work.
Data centers. Those are fun though.
Mhm.
I wouldn't mind going to data center. I like doing them.
They are cool. You ever seen a flywheel in a data center?
No, why?
You've not seen these. These are amazing. This is they use
A
them instead of battery.
flywheel?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is
Giant.
this a
sup-
steampunk data center?
You know what? They should do that. Anyways, instead of batteries, they put flywheels in. And it's a technology been around for a while, but it's catching on because environmental concerns, and batteries are expensive and they only last so many years. So
Uh-huh.
what you do is you take a, 2-ton giant disc of steel and you spin it at a higher RPM, and then you pull the power back off of it. And if the power goes out that keeps it spinning, it keeps spinning on the other side to generate, and it will generate one data center told me 20 minutes of power, which is more than enough time for them to switch over to their diesel generators, which will start spinning the flywheel again. It acts as the buffer.
That's really cool. I would not like to have an office anywhere in the path of that gigantic wheel.
Right.
Yeah, it's smaller than I thought it would be. It's big, but it wasn't quite as big as I thought. And it's very well caged because I think that's a concern. It's actually outside of the data center. How they like to do the double wall thing is on the outside of the double wall thing, and next to the
What's the RPM? What does it spin at?
nothing
Do you know?
really crazy. I think it was like 800 RPM or something. It was also slower than I thought.
Oh,
Yeah, but once you start swinging 2 tons in that level, I'm sure I couldn't stop it with my hand.
probably not. It reminds me of the fear I used to have way back in the day when they had propeller planes.
Oh.
I'd never want to sit in the row that is even with the propeller
Yeah.
in case
Right.
it flew off. So
Mhm.
anyway,
Concerns.
all right.
All right.
So, well, I guess we could say, hey, what did you do in the last couple of weeks? But I mean, we spent half of it with each other.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's more about what did we talk about while we were there at the
Yes.
MS Ignite conference, which is the play on words for the title of the show. For people
Mhm.
who don't know, that's where we just spent our last week hanging with Microsoft.
That's right. Yeah, seeing what we can talk about, get them to talk about their open source work, and
Mm-hmm.
it's actually pretty easy. You know, they're pretty open to it, and there's a lot of projects that are open sourcing their stuff.
And I'll go right out there and say, because I even brought up Ballmer's name, and I think he represented the height of some of that, and Bill Gates did too. Corporate beat 'em up 80s culture that went into the 90s of destroy everyone. We are the top dog company, and we're not satisfied until Netscape is dead and Lotus is dead and open source is a cancer. All that stuff. But I think the company is starting to change. I know people don't want to believe that, but you got to think too. They've been around for years. You can't just put the label, this company is a bad company, and it stick with them their entirety.
No, it stuck with them long enough, I guess.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, from an open source perspective.
Yeah, but we see them hiring, and I know there's been concerns. They've hired a lot of kernel developers. They've hired some big names in open source have come to work for them, and those people don't work for money. That's not their thing. They're not trying to build a bigger yacht like Ballmer was. They
Mhm.
work because they care about the projects they're doing. They work there because they have a vision, and Microsoft's helping them with that vision. And it's not is influenced by Microsoft. It's influenced. What's the guy's name? We talked about a couple names, and I should have pulled them up on my list. But people from the GNOME project, the people who created the Mono, those they all
Miguel
yeah.
Diacasa.
Yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
they've taken some serious heat. There's probably some life choices they had to think about because to rally against that company for so long and
They
then
put their
work for them-
family in the witness protection program. No.
yeah, really, the open source protection program. I mean, but to
Wow.
think that those people there, he could have taken a job anywhere. He could have got paid whatever, but he chose to work at Microsoft for a reason. I find that interesting. And I think that's part of the show of culture change that we witness firsthand. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be cautious. I'm not saying there's things I deeply disagree with Microsoft about
Mhm.
and, and policies, but I think there's a change of culture. And I think it's also from a business standpoint, Steve Ballmer, as we learned, was at the helm when some of this open source started coming in. He may not have ever admitted he was wrong about hating on Linux, but as a smart businessman, go, well, do I want this company to survive or do I want to become extinct like some of the other companies?
Like Wang.
Yeah. So it's interesting perspective. I think we got firsthand, dealing with these people and setting with these people. I mean, one of the people who brought Git, he worked for Git. So that, yeah,
Mhm.
they worked
Mhm.
for some of these labs and things like that. And they say, look, Microsoft's really embracing this and want us to change it, but they're not influencing them. They're not standing over them telling me, okay, this is how you're going to do it. And then we're going to close the source because you can't. It doesn't work that way.
Well, and I think, as far as their contributions to that code too, that ends up going back to the project per the licenses under which those projects are, um, put together. So
Right.
you can't,
It was a really interesting interview. I don't want to give away too much of the interview because that's what will be coming up, right?
mhm.
No, but I agree. And just, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have cut you off, Mary. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, Tony, that's fine. What did you interpret my look on my face as like bad Tony, bad
Yeah.
Tony? I'm sorry. No, I was
No.
I was thinking about what you were saying, and so my brow furrowed slightly. But just to talk a little bit about that, one of the, without giving away the interviews, but one of the things that what kind of intrigued me and I thought about during this whole thing was our discussion with the folks regarding SQL Server being available on Linux.
Mhm.
And the fact that and Tom, I think you had mentioned this, that there are some, maybe many entities or organizations where their data centers or their, where they do all that heavy crunching are basically Linux servers, and they have a few Windows servers around there just to handle SQL Server, because
Yeah.
at the time it only ran on Windows Server. So now that it's available on Linux, the question I had in my mind is, well, what's going to happen to Windows Server, or that particular software that Microsoft has that it runs on now? Because my take on it is that it's not that Linux is superior. Well, my take on Linux is very superior to a lot of things, but
Well,
especially in that.
Yeah. And
Phil, I said that for your benefit.
well, and it also is interesting to think about. Even though it's proprietary software, there is a lot of
Mhm.
companies that may be embracing open source, but they realize there's a plethora of pre-written AI analytics systems that are all written with R and Python that completely is integrated within to SQL. So it's like, we need to get this work done. At some point, businesses have to get work done. They can't just
Mhm.
adopt the philosophy of open source. I mean, I am open source as I can be at my company, but I have proprietary programs I have to run. I purchase some of them based on the fact that they'll run on Linux. So if I was a company that had a need for something like SQL Server because of all the logic and all the business logic that's already written, I would have to buy a license for it. Good news, I'm not, but
Mhm.
Mhm.
You also have to look at it from the development perspective. A lot of the tools that come out in the free open source community, they're really attractive. Things like containerization, um, different code editors, static code analysis tools. All this stuff is really attractive if you have a terminal that you can just type a few words into, and now you're running the quote unquote the new hotness. If you're a developer in the Microsoft world, well, you might have to wait a long time to get tools that resemble anything that open source has in the slightest.
Right.
Unless you're running, but where does a Linux subsystem for Windows come into play in that?
that's
You're
just
still waiting on Microsoft to develop it and release it.
Mhm.
But a couple of things we saw at Build, they showed was really cool, and it's not really coming out as soon as they thought that it was going to. So it's still something we're waiting on.
Mhm.
and there's a lot of challenges in putting a Linux subsystem inside of there. But I think that's also a call for them because you look at so many developers that either run a Mac or a Linux workstation, and that's because they have easy access to the terminal stuff. So I think that's them going, hey, you can use a Windows PC. We have that Linux thing. We tried to integrate it. I mean, I get the concept. It's probably a call for developers to try and keep them on the platform. But I don't know. Is it too late? Is it saving the dying Windows code? And I honestly will say that even looking at Microsoft's perspective and watching them log in to show some of their code tools and their workflow, they've eliminated most all the VPNs from their network. They do everything by logging into web interfaces, which kind of makes Windows irrelevant.
Yeah,
I mean, they're trying to
I
make
think
Edge
you've got a good
relevant,
point
but
there. And
they do make
I'm
them use
trying to
Edge.
remember who I was standing next to when we watched, maybe it was you, Tony. We watched, it was all done in the web browser. Do you remember
Mhm.
that? They pulled up various desktop tools.
Oh yeah, yeah. It
You know,
was
obviously they were Microsoft desktop tools like Excel and that type of thing, but it was all run inside a browser.
Yep.
It's really pretty interesting to see.
Even
And so, yeah, Tom, so that really, plays to your point that that the OS is, Windows OS.
I mean, I'm
Maybe.
sure they know there's the long tail of legacy is going to keep beating them up to keep supporting it because there's so many enterprise applications written, so many companies that wrote some type of whatever tool, XYZ tool that runs as an app on there that is not being ported to web actively or
Mhm.
anytime soon. But that's the small business market is really embracing it because they're so much hating all the apps they have to load on their computer. It's very much the enterprise is hard to do, but the small business world's going, I can just log into a web browser, and if my laptop dies, I throw it away and get another one and log into a web browser.
Yeah.
That seems cool.
And if that
Right.
laptop dies, no. The other thing too, and I don't know if you guys had a chance to do this. I think you probably attended maybe more sessions than I did. I wandered around Swag Row. No, I actually wandered around the exhibit area. I did get some cool swag.
Mhm.
I
Oh
didn't
yeah.
I didn't win any big stuff this time around, but I did talk to a few vendors. Oh, and by the way, too, Red Hat was there,
Mhm.
SUSE was there, but again, Ubuntu was not there. And I just think I thought that was kind
Because
of
they're already inside of Windows. Do they need to be there?
They're
Um,
streamlining a company with the intention to get purchased by someone.
Oh,
that could be.
Right.
They're
That'll be
busy
interesting to see.
negotiating.
But anyway, in talking to some of the vendors, and I did take a picture of a slide from Veritas. They this particular slide was one of their panels on their at their booth, and it was talking about scaling and backing up to Azure, which is Microsoft's cloud system. And what was really cool about it is at the very center of this slide or this panel, where they have, above it they had the local workloads where people are just working on stuff locally, and then of course some of the cloud services. There's a little master media server, and the guy said that server runs Linux. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then it prompted me to think about, maybe next time if we go to one of these things, we should spend some time in the exhibit area. Talking with some of the vendors and finding out how Linux plays a role in the products that they offer.
Right. And we did talk to a few. I
Kept
know.
trying to set up that Red Hat interview, and that just didn't work out,
Right. Yeah.
unfortunately.
And then there was a Linux Academy was there. They said they wanted to get together with us.
Mm-hmm.
Solar Winds was there, and they wanted to get together with us. But it's about monitoring Linux servers and stuff, and then how much you can run the SolarWinds stack on Linux and Windows together, and so it'll be cool. So we still got to get a hold of them, but
Yeah, I'm excited. I got to message the guys. They have my contact because we use the whole SolarWinds stack, but they interviewed me too for testimonial stuff about using your product, and I use Linux. And then the guys from the backup team recognized me because they watched my YouTube video, which made me excited. I made a YouTube video on their product.
Sure.
I think Tom saw a lot of people that recognize him from his YouTube videos.
I was the firewall guy to a couple people, which had me pretty excited.
Firewall guy.
Firewalls from
we
you.
were just happy to hang out with Tom, weren't we, Tony?
That's right.
Well, we got to meet Paul Thrott and Mary Jo Foley, which was really cool too.
Oh, yeah, that was, and we met them at the World of Beer.
Yeah, World of Beer. And she couldn't, she was like so humbled that she goes, I'm not a celebrity. I'm just a tech journalist, but all of you are here because of me. And it's a very humbling experience. Like,
yeah, because she had that, was it like a little party or something?
Yeah.
Or get
that
together
overflowed. Like there was,
there
World
was.
of Beer could not handle all the people that were fans of.
And she seemed pretty excited to see that Linux was there. I mean, I thought that was interesting,
And I like that Paul Thrott is even more bitter in person than he is on the show. It made me so happy hearing him talk. We can't even say what he said. But it was great. I'll tell you afterwards, Phil. You might be interested.
Yeah. So anyway, but yeah, so there's just a lot of interesting things to see there, and I think I never did talk to anybody at the Docker booth, but I think they were there.
Yeah,
weren't they?
Docker was there.
Yep.
Yeah, it was a lot of cool people there. I
For
went and
sure.
talked to so many different vendors. It was fun, but I did really enjoy talking to the Microsoft people quite a bit, especially because so many of them, like I said, had that open source involvement with things, which was, and they're really willingness to share. And I think that's at the core of a lot of developers. They get excited, they want to share and publish their stuff, and they all have GitHub accounts and they have projects on there and everything else. And that's like, you can't stop that open source feeling, But I will admit the conference, which I'm sorry, because I did get an email and Tony probably seen it. We were not at OLF.
Yeah.
We did miss OLF. I almost thought about just driving down there, but I don't know.
It crossed my mind
was worn
too,
out.
but I was kind of, yeah.
I'm traveled out.
Well, I flew in Saturday. I flew home yesterday. I got home about noon. So by the time I would have gotten the kids settled at home and then drove down there, it would have been 5 o'clock and all the talks have been done. And
yeah.
So.
And I didn't have I wasn't sure if there was a hotel available and things like that too. So
right. Yeah. And I wouldn't have been able to afford the hotel because I just spent a lot of money this week.
Yeah.
So I would have had to turn around and drive another 4 hours back.
I gotta admit, there is certainly a major culture difference from the going to Build, going to Ignite. There's such a major culture difference between the Microsoft conferences and the Linux conferences. And I'm just not talking about there's less face tattoos, and people with purple mohawks, but it's I like the Linux conferences because there's the talk, and then no one wants to leave the talk until they throw us out of the room. And then we gather outside the room at a Linux conference to just go and geek out and discuss something.
The hallway track.
Yeah, there's the hallway track. And you don't see that at Microsoft. The people are less, I don't want to say less social, but like the people there, a lot of them are going to say less social. Anyway, I can come up with it.
Well,
they're not unfriendly, but like, yeah, that was cool. Work sent me here. It was almost like the attitude.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that is because, well, first of all, it's a huge conference, but also I think that people aren't as connected, where you've got communities in open source software that
Yes.
just by design, just by how that whole collaboration works, I think that helps foster that sense of connectedness that you see at a Linux convention more than say at a large convention like that. And Phil, I bet you got some things to say about that.
It seems like they need to implement GNU Social, possibly through GNU Ring.
There you go.
All
So is
right.
that something that came up at your meeting this week?
It's a piece of software that we've tried as a Skype and Google Hangout, Vimeo, Zoom replacement.
Yeah.
It's end-to-end
it-
encrypted
Are you
group
still
web chat.
piloting? Are you still piloting it?
We tried it when it was super beta. Hopefully, it's less beta now.
Hopefully.
And one of the things I had mentioned before the show started was we were researching Slack replacements, and we tried them and we set them up, and we thought they were incredibly cool and looked, because Rocket Chat especially is awesome until you get to the phone app, and it's just, that's where all the love dies. And that's why Phil uses Slack.
My kernel for a good phone application for chat. That's not Facebook or Google Hangouts.
Yeah,
I wish you could do group signal.
that would be, yeah. The only problem I have with signals is only my phone, and then that becomes, there's not a way to get signal on my,
Yeah, there is.
oh, is there? I've never,
Yes,
I never looked.
I use it on my desktops.
Really?
Mhm.
Okay, we're gonna talk after this. Point me in the right direction.
Will do.
Because I don't use my phone throughout the day a lot. I sit at the computer because I can answer all my calls and everything. Anyways, back to Microsoft. Or actually, are we going to move on to news? Or are we going to just?
Yeah, let's move on to news.
Yeah, I think we've caught up with what
Yeah,
we've been
we've-
doing.
Yes, we
Phil's
have a
looking at
limit to
us
how
like-
many times we can say Microsoft in any.
Yeah, in any one
I think
podcast.
so,
And
yeah.
I think I think our listeners are probably, and have probably said, okay, that's enough. We got to move on and talk about some.
and
other
I think Phil's
cool
looking at it
stuff.
going, who are these people that used to talk about
Yeah.
Linux with me?
Yeah.
Good thing
Hey,
I
we're
didn't
still
go.
here. Well, one last thing I'll say is the first thing I did with that Microsoft backpack I got is I put a little Linux inside pin right on top of it.
Yes.
I gotta get one of those and put that on mine.
Yeah, it looks great. It just says Microsoft that says Linux inside.
That's cool.
And I'm going to keep it on there too. So, what do we have for news? Tom's looking intently at a system. Hey, I'll tell you what, Tom. While you do that, I want to mention that there's a guy. There's a guy. He's actually an engineer, developer, and entrepreneur, and his name is Carlos Fenoyosa. I believe he's not. I believe he's from Spain, and I hope I pronounced his name correctly. But he published. This is actually it's a little old, but I came upon it and I wanted to share it because I don't think I'd shared it before. He talked about OpenBSD from a veteran Linux user perspective. So it was a fairly lengthy blog post about this, and just talking about his history and his journey using Linux, and then his take on OpenBSD as a Linux user. So it was just kind of interesting. And one of the section headlines in his blog post is GNU is really not Unix. And I think he probably extended that to, I don't know if he did or not. But anyway, I thought that was kind of an interesting blog post, despite the fact that it is, didn't come out last week. I thought that was kind of interesting. And I've got this other one too. And we talked a little bit about this before we recorded. And that is there's a company called Presearch, and they're building a blockchain-based search engine. And I thought that was warranted a little bit of a discussion, simply because blockchain is kind of I'll say it's kind of a sexy term and a sexy technology now, because it is very anonymous or security based. And it really sets out a very intensive ledger of all transactions.
Yes.
Assuming that it's the same as you see with Bitcoin and that type of thing.
I think there's a lot of places you can apply that to get things. We talked to Lillian before a little bit about like real estate and things like that, because of the whole titling industry here in America is very broken, because every time you buy something, you have to research whoever owned it. and then get insurance in case the person who did the research is wrong. And I'm like, that's just, yeah, if you had a blockchain and we could establish a chain of
Really?
ownership and history of any property,
Yeah,
it would just be a lot easier.
Yeah. So anyway, it was interesting to read that that particular technology is being used to generate or to create a search engine capability. And then the only other thing I was going to mention is that Krita 3.3.0, they just released a new version. That version just came out. So that's probably
Mm.
KDE Corner, but I slid that right in there to the news.
What is
Ah,
Krita?
Krita is so cool.
Yeah,
is.
it's a
Art-
graphic. What is it? What would you? How
Like
would you say it? A
drawing
graphic drawing?
artist, like more like drawing, like using
In
Mhm.
Adobe world, it's kind of like it's sort of like Illustrator, I think.
yes,
Mm.
it's somewhere between
Mhm.
Illustrator and Photoshop.
Yes.
It's not fully either, but for people who want to create digital art, and for example, if you were creating a comic book, you want to do frame by frame animation, that would be a great tool to use for it, and it is used for that.
And it's cross-platform
Yes.
compatible.
Mm.
And one of the things and this just came out this past week, but one of the other features that they've included, they one of the developers refactored their hardware accelerated capacity function, or excuse me, their hardware accelerated display functionality to use what they call angle on Windows instead of native OpenGL, which means that many problems with Intel display chips and broken driver versions are worked around because Krita now can use Direct 3D. This was funny. It can use Direct 3D indirectly. I read that when I last night. I started laughing when I read that because I just thought, oh. But anyway, so there are quite a few more changes that were released in this current version. But yeah, it's really a nice program, and it's I believe it's part of the KDE.org family of applications too. But you can run it on anything. Wow,
That is pretty
Oh,
neat.
it's
any
cool.
OS. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. It's KRITA.
Yeah,
Mhm,
I've got it
that's
installed on my
correct.
Yeah.
computer. I wanted to play with it, but it's certainly not Photoshop.
Can confirm. I use it to make emoji.
Yeah.
And then my wife uses it to try and switch away from the Adobe stack.
Cool.
Cool.
And she's on a Mac. So it
Yeah.
definitely works
Oh.
there.
Yeah.
All right. So those are just some of the things that I had from my news front today.
Well, as much as I've been talking about motorcycles, we're going to talk about Vespa.
Vespa.
Oh, Vespa, yeah.
Yeah.
The scooter.
Motorcycle Vespa.
Well, no, actually, it's the open source project.
Mm.
Yahoo's big data search engine analytics is now on GitHub. They're dumped it all. It's called Vespa. It's by Oath, and they're open sourcing their whole stack of this, which seems Yahoo's not relevant, but they clearly created some relevant technologies, and so kind of interesting. It's all going to be on there. Open source. Building applications means increasing with huge amounts of data, while developers can use Hadoop stack to store and batch process big data, and Storm to stream it. These technologies help with serving the results of the users. And then they go into really talking about releasing Vespa, or making it easy for anyone to build applications that can compute response times over large data sets. Kind of like, I don't know, SQL.
Right.
But
Yep.
it's interesting because that's one of the things we deal with, data sets that are increasingly big because we can gather data at a alarming rate.
Yeah,
We would describe
I
it.
like that. I like that descriptor at an
Yeah,
alarming rate.
Alarming rate. So being able to have an open source that you can do searches on big data sets, and I kind of wonder if this open source will help companies like DuckDuckGo make their search engine better and things like that. So
What does DuckDuckGo use? They don't use any part of Google. I don't mean to put you on the spot, Tom.
Don't they do like the searches across all the search engines?
yeah,
Is that so it's sort of an aggregator?
it's an aggregator.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you know anything about the technology that runs? I've never really researched it.
Yeah, we're gonna put you on the spot, Phil.
No, I don't, unfortunately. I use DuckDuckGo and I
Me too.
like it, but no.
I don't know. How
I
it's a
really
mystery.
wish that you could type in mathematics into it and it would give you the same results that Google does. That is my number one gripe.
Mm, yeah.
Oh.
Oh, yeah, because it.
What's the mathematics one?
Like, I want to know what 1 + 1 is from DuckDuckGo, please.
No,
I can tell you that. You don't even need to go to DuckDuckGo.
What's
Just
that
call
other
me.
engine though that does that? I can't remember the name of it right now.
The name escapes me right now.
A
Yeah.
calculator.
Well, no, it does. It's a you get the free version for pretty basic, but it's a web enabled. It's a analytics engine that you can type in expressions to, deep expressions.
Oh, Mathematica.
Like that.
Wolfram Alpha.
Wolfram Alpha.
There we
Oh
go.
yes, I played around with that.
Yes, I love that.
Oh, that took a second. I used to use
Wolfram
it a lot
Alpha.
during school.
Yes, Wolfram Alpha does great stuff.
Mhm.
But nonetheless, very interesting that they open sourced all that. And once again, this open source thing seems to be catching on.
They've got an Apache 2 license on it, so that's pretty cool.
No, yeah, we'll go with that.
So if anybody uses it, they have to let us know.
Yeah.
So a bit of trivia, and I don't know if there's a way to absolutely certify this, but I'm going to believe it's true, that the oldest well-seeded torrent on the Pirate Bay is Revolution OS. Have you ever
Yeah.
watched it, Phil? Aw,
Oh.
Don't hate me, but no.
please watch it.
It's
still
actually
on-
pretty good.
Yeah, watch it on YouTube. It's actually a higher quality one on YouTube than there is in the Pirate Bay. Don't ask.
So speaking of technology related movies, if any listeners happen to catch this section, let us know your favorite ones and why. Also, let us know what the most ridiculous use of a shell command in a TV show or movie that you've seen is.
Oh,
Any-
Phil, that sounds like an intro to something you saw. Did you see any, or is it just a?
There was a screenshot I saw yesterday of some elite hacking movie, and they ran the command free, and it was just free because everything was reported in bytes.
Oh,
that's funny.
okay.
If you ever go to nmap.org/movies, they catalog everywhere that nmap is used,
Yeah,
just so you know.
that's funny.
Cool.
One of the latest ones I think is out is Ghost in the Shell. They did a remake of that. That looked pretty good. I haven't seen it yet though.
I want to see that. The manga was awesome.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's
Oh, you haven't seen the Ghost in the Shell movie?
Not the newest one. I
Let
think
me-
it has Scarlett Johansson in it.
It does, and let me retitle for you: a Ghost in the Shell inspired movie. All right,
Oh,
it's good, but it's just if you thought they were going to follow the manga, I'm sorry, it is a Ghost in the Shell inspired movie.
Mm. All right. So one article I found is how it's on Krebs on security, but if you've been to Sonic recently, then you may have your credit card. It was leaked.
Oh,
It
Whole
says
Foods
Oh,
too.
really? Whole Foods?
33,600 locations across 45 states for Sonic.
Oh, the drive-in
Yeah.
Yeah.
food place. I was thinking some.
I always think the hedgehog when you say it, but I was like,
And they said that they found something was previously called the Fire Tiger. Or there's like 3 R's at the end of Fire
Tiger.
Yeah. So I haven't gotten into deep into that, but it's basically make sure your credit's not safe anywhere anymore. Your credit card, your personal information, doesn't matter where you work or you use it. So I mean, I guess I'm gonna have to go back and start using cash again.
Right now, I believe that Puerto Rico is only able to use cash because of
They have no
the
power.
hurricane. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, they're safe from right now.
well, yeah. Probably the least of their worries, though.
Right.
I think so.
Hold my beer, Equifax.
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh, don't worry, Deloitte and Touche has got Equifax's
Oh
back.
man, I'll tell you. But you know what's sort of funny is that I don't think there's been as much publicity about the Deloitte security breach as there was about Equifax, and that's probably due to the type that it was, where
Yes.
you have hundreds of millions of consumer personal information exposed via Equifax, and we all know what
Well-
Equifax is. But a lot of people, everyday people, they're not customers of Deloitte. Just
And
big law firms, big corporations.
I won't pick too much because it'll cause too much of a segue, but I won't lie. There will be results from the Deloitte and Touche that there will not be from Equifax. And it's part of the way the U.S. legal system works. Screw the people. Oh my gosh, you messed with the businesses. Congress is like, act. You know what? They exposed my financials. And if you expose the financials of people in Congress who
point,
are audited
Tom.
by Deloitte Touche, they're like, well, and they're the people who hold the power and influence. So
Right.
their stuff, you may not be seeing it in the news, but I guarantee there are gears turning in Congress right now because they're deeply invested, and the companies, every Fortune every Fortune 500 company has touched Deloitte and Touche at some point. They audit, they do their SOCs. They are the big player for American companies. So watch out. That's going to be, there's going to be a lot more result, I feel.
Mhm.
And it was all like, oh yeah, we didn't have a second factor on our Azure. That's how they got pwned.
Jeez.
All of that kind of stuff is so simple. Like the Equifax one was just pure negligence. It was an Apache struts issue that was patched back in March.
Well, it's a little deeper. They admitted now, there's more research coming out that it was exploited 5 days after the patch. Now, Apache Struts 1, non-trivial to patch because it requires a recompilation of all your apps after you patch. So we get that. Where I think the real security hole is with them is, how did I get in through a web shell and pwn the internals of a company? It's the lateral movement that we want to know. You should not, a web shell should not let me pwn a company.
Yeah.
I can discuss that with you afterwards.
Yeah.
Ooh,
In
Tony, we should hang out for that.
during my time in Japan earlier in June, I got to talk to a guy in the SE Linux community who fixed the SE Linux policy for Tomcat applications to help prevent struts problems. Prior to March of 2017, I guess the SE Linux module set the user type to basically allow any user to have access to files and folders labeled as such. And then he went looking through the policy and said, oh, this is a big problem. This is how people can get into my servers. And then he fixed it. And I got to meet him. Really nice guy.
Oh,
That's cool.
So on the security topic, the CCleaner is a really interesting breach because I think this is the first major, at least announced supply chain level breach that we've seen, where they infected the machine that compiles the code and sent it out there. Because that bypasses everything, because you have a signed security certificate, and because they compromised the machine that compiles, it was able to inject code that was signed and runnable with the CCleaner. So if you're whitelisting to only certain signed code, it still runs. No antivirus catches this. Then to think that they had was it 700,000 machines infected, but would only look at the domain they belong to before they would activate. That's where things get even scarier. And also, I don't know how Talos, and I'll throw it in the show notes. Talos is being very, you familiar with the Talos security people? They're
I know of them, yes.
Yes. They were given, and it's vague, the command and control server. How'd they get it? Undoubtedly a 3 or 4 letter agency got it to them, but that's how they understand the payloads and things like that. So they were very specific that if it was inside of Sony, Cisco, it would only activate if it was inside of one of those domains. So, and it had a lot of checking, and then it was very limited amounts. That way the egress data would be hard to see and mask. So it's a scary thought, and why we really need, one, everything to be open source. Two, to review companies like CCleaner and their policies regarding their server. So how does your server get infected? And this is a clever, scary, deep. This is really as the plot thickens, I'm impressed with how clever it is.
That's a reminder to all admins out there. Your build server is an absolutely critical piece of infrastructure, if not your most critical piece of infrastructure, if you build your own packages.
Yeah,
that's right.
So absolutely make sure that you do updates on that, review your firewall rules, set up inbound and outbound network filtering on that. And yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And it gets a step
I don't even have a build server, Phil, but after listening to you,
don't want one.
I'm frightened now.
Yeah, you don't want one. It's a lot of responsibility.
Exactly.
So, well, yeah, you gotta monitor, who's on there, because it might be your filters are allowing through legitimate traffic, but if somebody has pwned somebody's credentials, then they're getting in as a legitimate user, which that's got to be watched.
Well, and with the value of the information, so think if you have 700,000 infections, but you're only waiting to activate on certain domains, makes me think of nation state actor. And a reason why you are combing for something specific.
Nation state actor. That acronym.
Yeah, it was referred to that. Yeah. All right. Yeah, play on acronyms. Yeah.
That's
Tom,
funny.
did you do that on purpose, or was that just
It's too early for me to do
coincidence?
things like that on purpose. But I am looking at a little NSA sticker on the cross on Mary's laptop. So
Oh yeah.
We're now on a list.
Probably.
Linux got us on the list already.
Yeah. Just for using Linux. That's right.
Yeah. So you think if you're going to do an exploit for money, 700,000 is a good base of users to install it on. But when you're coming for data because you want ins at certain companies, that becomes what's your purpose, what's your end game. But of course, pwning Cisco would be interesting. I mean, that's So, nonetheless, that's a big concern now. Is going to be all that. I'll link to the Tail Security blogs. They break down the code details of it. What else we got? I'd say, I didn't put a lot of news articles together.
Well, you were on the road traveling.
I was on traveling.
I've got one. Alibaba, the gigantic search engine platform, cloud service provider, they just dumped $27 million at MariaDB.
Yay.
Wow.
So over the course of
I don't know whether to be happy or concerned. Well, what is your take?
Hey, I'm happy for it because it's not.
Well, I'm happy for Maria.
Yeah.
Right, but sometimes when that happens, then something ends up getting sold, and then it goes closed source or something like that.
Alibaba has their own search engine called AliSQL, and that's got some license, and that's available on the internet for everybody to look at. But this makes me wonder if they're moving away from their proprietary piece of software for whatever reason.
Oh, interesting.
And going to MariaDB. If anything, it still helps the community because you've got to think about the ridiculous scale that they use MariaDB at.
Yeah.
Right.
And what sorts of network performance optimizations we'll get.
And aren't they the Chinese eBay kind of?
Yes.
Alibaba?
That too.
They're
everything.
So much.
Picture if Amazon had zero competition, and that's what Alibaba looks like in China. There's simply buy everything, you search everything is done through the internet. Is Alibaba in China? It's really weird when
what happened to Baidu? Chinese Google.
They're all. I believe Alibaba owns them. Don't they own Baidu?
I don't know, but I do know that their robot spider touches all of my server logs.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds creepy.
It is.
But I'm not surprised.
It is. But you know what? We talked a little bit when we had our meeting with the SQL people. And I do like the shirts. Data is the new bacon. And it's not anymore about the it's becoming less about the tool you use. The data is the important part. Open source and
the fat is the tasty part.
The fat's the tasty part, bacon. But it's open sourcing and working on the MariaDB and expanding that is so important because that's not the proprietary information anymore. It's the database you run. It's the data you have, and making the database system that can do better analytics, better processing of that data helps everyone, and especially helps the people with the bigger data sets. So it makes sense because they ain't going to release any of the data that they gathered by touching off Phil's servers. But by touching off Phil's servers, they've accumulated more data. And they need to process it better. So dumping 27 million into MariaDB, chump change for them.
Yeah, well, then good.
Wonderful from MariaDB. I think it's a really good.
I'm happy for them. It just the only concern I had was sometimes that is done as an introductory move to something that might not be so good. But then they would just fork it. So
that's a good point. They did get a person put on the MariaDB board as well.
Okay.
So I believe you're onto something.
Oh,
yeah. But then again, they kind of need to tell them if they're on the advisory board, MariaDB can directly talk with the person. What is the challenge you're having? What does MariaDB not do? And they needed to do this.
No, we'll have to keep an eye on that.
Yeah. But I think that's something about the open source community that I think companies are realizing is when your customers can talk directly with the programmers and make comments on GitHub and requests, things go faster. There's not a salesperson in between. You want to have an account manager in between. Hey, tell them I need this feature. And then let's go a step further. What if your customer knows how to code and actually suggest a code change that you can look at it and submit it on Git? That becomes what drives open source and why without a it's just this driving force that drives the software development in our world and are able to take over things
Mhm.
like Microsoft.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
Very cool.
Anything?
Yep. I don't know. I that's about as far as I found some music. Are we?
What'd you find?
Oh, you
Yeah.
found
What did you
music?
find, Tony?
Well, we were kicking around names for the show, right before we started. but
Yeah.
I think I said we
We were still sort of
survived
kicking
or
them around when we
we
started
lived.
too.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I found a song called "They Live,"
All right.
and let's see. The tags are electronic, down tempo, and OFI. I don't know what that means, but
OFI.
we're good with moving on, right?
Yeah.
You guys have anything
Yeah,
else?
no. We
No,
have
we
a
probably
million
should
things we're
close
trying
the-
to consolidate to show.
Yeah.
Just a quick show
Yes.
today, and then
That's right.
all right. Well, here we go. Maybe it's not going to. I don't know
So
if it's
here
gonna
we don't go yet.
This one goes out to Rowdy Roddy Piper.
Is he a wrestler?
He was the star of They Live.
Oh. But he was he a wrestler
Says
too?
it's-
Yes, he was.
Okay. That's how I knew him. Or knew of him.
I turned up the volume. Volume says it's up.
Okay, well,
Maybe it won't be playing.
We'll splice that in.
yeah, yeah.
As in Tom will splice that in. So I just say we, as in I will.
Yeah, Tom.
I will go do that in a minute over at my desk.
Yeah. All right.
Tony will send me the link. Secrets of how the show is edited.
Did you get that out of Jamendo?
It is. Yep. It's They Live by Indigo 78.
Huh. By Indigo 78.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Actually, I had found it on the CC Hits.
Mhm.
It was number 10, I think, for this week. And they their link over to the song was wrong. So I had to search Jamendo. So
Okay.
I'm gonna I'll send them an email saying, hey, you gotta fix your link.
Yeah, I think so.
Anyway, so I guess we've come to the end of the show. You have been listening to Sunday Morning Linux Review. This was episode 251. Igniting Open Source.
Yeah, there we
Yeah,
go.
I
Thank you.
remember.
Thank you, Tony.
This is Tony Bemis.
Mary Tomich.
Phil Parada.
And Tom Lawrence.
See you next time.
You've been listening to the Sunday Morning Linux
Hi.
Review. If you would like more information about this or other shows, go to smlr.us. Feel free to send comments to show@smlr.us or give us a call at 734-258-7009. I'm John Miller. If you don't like it, you can
Bite my 8-bit metal ass. That's bite with a Y.
Goodbye, everybody on YouTube.